Rusk disagrees with you, and he was the Secretary of State at the time, but that's fine.
The communist nations have exploited the turmoil of a time of transition in an effort to extend the communist control into other areas of the world.
Thoughts on Dean Rusk and America's involvement in Vietnam? I know next to nothing about that.
Exactly.
I'm not going to, or we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, what, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Let me ask you one thing before I forget. Pravat Bank. I understand the governor of the bank is tentative about setting a date certain for the transition to take place. And I'm being told secondhand that, I don't know this is her position for sure, that she is unsure of a date until she gets an agreement from you. Here's what I've told them. I've told them to get back to her and set a date, and I would talk to you about the date. Because this is getting very, very close. What I don't want to have happen, I don't want Trump to get in a position where he thinks he's about to buy onto a policy where the financial system is going to collapse and he's going to be looked to pour more money into Ukraine. That's how he'll think about it before he gets sophisticated enough to know the detail. So anything you can do to push the Pravat Bank to closure so that the IMF loan comes forward, I would respectfully suggest is critically important to your economic as well as physical security. I know it's difficult. I know Kolomoisky is a pain in the ass and a problem for everybody, but it really is critical.
We now know a lot more than what we used to know about the Biden crime family. It's very important to note, for some reason, that you don't have to dislike Mr. Biden, although I do, and you don't have to love the prior president to understand that a certain couple of things are true, and that is that the Biden crime family is a real thing. But the good news is that Slate.com and Time is here to help us with our disillusions, to let us know that this is all a giant misunderstanding. We've been misled. Now, the basics of the facts are very simple, of what we crazy conspiracy theorists are supposed to believe, in that, especially when it comes to Ukraine, Joe Biden threatened to withhold $1 billion of aid money unless they fired Shokin, the prosecutor who was investigating Burisma, where Hunter Biden, the crackhead, worked for some unknown reason. But their claim to, but don't worry, they're going to assess us that we're all just crazy people who watch Fox News and who are listening to conspiracy theories that we've heard on the internet. But they're here to help the smart people, let all of us dummies who don't know anything, they're here to tell us the truth. Well, let's go into this slowly, because there's a lot here. So let's deal with lie number one. Lie number one that Slate.com claims, and there's overlap between Slate and Time, of course, between these two articles, which both cover and regurgitate the same nonsense, as the media tends to do. And that is that Shokin was fired not because he was intimidated by Biden for investigating corruption to where his son worked. No. He was fired because he was corrupt, and many people have said he was corrupt. That is a lie, and it's untrue. And I'm going to show you why and how. That's just one of the many of the problems, many of the problems of this article from the great writers at Slate and Time, the intellectual superiors to us, we are never supposed to question. And if we do, we are crazy right-wing Fox News extremists who love Putin and suck Donald Trump's dick. That's not the case. Now, why would that be untrue? Well, there's a December 2015 progress report that the European Union, it claims the European Union was satisfied that Ukraine had achieved noteworthy progress, including preventing and fighting corruption, and thus was eligible for visa-free travel in Europe. The European Commission noted that Shokin had just appointed the head of the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecution Office, which is described as an indispensable component of an effective and independent institutional framework for combating high-level corruption. So it is a lie. It is a lie. Now there's a report of protesters who are arguing that Shokin needs to be fired, calling him the diamonds and Shokin go together. But if you know Ukraine, you know there are multiple factions out there. You know that they're all responsible to different political factions out there. And the fact that there was a protest out there demanding that Shokin be fired, or that there may have been elements within Ukraine that wanted him gone in the name of being corrupt when he was actually fighting corruption, isn't newsworthy. The new office would help the newly established National Anti-Corruption Bureau combat corruption, the report noted, and urged Ukrainian leadership to ensure that both bodies were fully operational by the first quarter of 2016. So that's a lie. It's just a lie. Shokin was gone by March 29, 2016, forced out by Biden's threats to then Ukrainian President Poroshenko that he would withhold $1 billion in U.S. aid unless the prosecutor general was fired, which he did in public because he's a moron. Based on these commitments, the anti-corruption benchmark is deemed to have been achieved, the European Commission report found. The progress noted in the fifth report on the anti-corruption policies, particularly legislative and institutional progress, has continued. At the time, the EU Commissioner for Migration, Home Affairs and Citizenship issued a public statement on December 18, 2015, praising Shokin and other officials for making enormous progress on reform. I quote, "I congratulate the Ukrainian leadership on the progress made towards completing the reform process, which will bring important benefits to the citizens of Ukraine in the future," then EU Commissioner Dimitrios Avramopoulos said. Quote, "The hard work towards achieving this significant goal has paid off. Now it is important to keep upholding all the standards." Shokin's office issued a warrant to seize all of Burisma's owners Zelchevsky's properties in Kiev on February 2nd, 2016. Hunter's former business partner, Devon Archer, testified last month in the House Oversight Committee that Burisma added Hunter to its board so that people would be intimidated to mess with them legally. Archer says Shokin was a threat to Burisma. He ended up seizing assets of Zelchevsky, a house, some cars, a couple of properties, and Zelchevsky actually never went back to Ukraine after Shokin seized all of his assets. Last month in Kiev, Shokin denied that he was corrupt and said he was fired illegally. He accused Biden of interfering in the internal affairs of Ukraine by forcing his removal and described the then Vice President's threat to withhold U.S. aid as blackmail. Shokin points out that 7 years later, his ouster, neither Biden nor anyone else has produced evidence of corruption or wrongdoing by him. The European Commission's praise for Ukraine's progress on anti-corruption reform during Shokin's tenure echoes internal State Department's documents published. A task force of State Treasury and Justice Department experts had recommended in October 2015 that Ukraine should receive $1 billion in U.S. loans when Biden traveled to Kiev in December 2015 because the country had made adequate progress in fighting corruption. The State Department memos included a personal letter from top U.S. official Victoria Nuland to Shokin, telling him that Secretary of State John Kerry was impressed with Shokin's progress. Now, do you think I'm propagandizing this? Do you think I'm making up these letters from Nuland to Shokin? I mean, that you can easily point that out and call me a liar. Look it up. Am I lying? But Biden, Nuland, and others later claimed that then VP was simply carrying out official U.S. policy, and the European officials agreed that Shokin was not corrupt and needed to be removed. It was a policy that was coordinated tightly with Europeans and the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. But not only did we not see progress, we saw the Prosecutor General office go backwards in this period, Nuland now says. It's very different from what she wrote at the time. Anders Oslund, a senior fellow of the Atlantic Council in Washington, D.C., told the Wall Street Journal in 2019, everyone in the Western community wanted Shokin sacked. The whole G7, the IMF, the EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, everybody was united that Shokin must go, and the spokesman for this was Joe Biden. However, none of the European bodies cited ever called specifically for Shokin's removal or even mentioned him by name. Instead, 2 months after Biden's pressure campaign began, bodies such as the IMF issued statements genuinely criticizing Ukraine's slow progress in fighting corruption. That's very different from demanding that Shokin be fired. In an August 19, 2015 report, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace singled out Shokin's office for among the most active on reforms. Quote, Ukraine has adopted a package of anti-corruption laws and established a set of institutions to fight corruption, said Carnegie's Ukraine Reform Monitor report. The General Prosecutor's Office has been the agency most active in this agenda. So what we basically have is that over and over again, if we go through the past history, there's no problem with Shokin until he gets in the way of Hunter Biden. And then Joe Biden steps in to save his son's ass. Now, the story on the investigation into Burisma keeps changing. This time out, Slate and Time have stuck with the story that Shokin was going to be fired anyway because he was corrupt. But that wasn't always the media story. And we'll deal with that for Lie too, because they didn't mention it, because the media has changed its mind. Now, maybe Slate and Time magazine didn't hold by this line, because the other lines that the media have tried to portray have been now proven to be absolutely ridiculous. One of them is the completely absurd, well, Shokin was fired for not investigating Burisma, which is infuriatingly stupid since Hunter works there. That would be saying, yes, I work for a corrupt company, but that prosecutor over there, he didn't investigate me. That makes zero sense.
Is a company that you worked for. You were working for a corrupt company? I'm supposed to believe that your dad told the Ukrainians, listen, you need to have Burisma where my son works as a matter of fact, you need to have my son investigated. I want my son behind bars. That general prosecutor isn't doing his job, and I'm going to withhold $1 billion worth of aid until my son is arrested. What the fuck is this supposed to mean? I'll tell you what it means in Hunter's head. You see, in order to believe the Hunter Biden story, Shokin cannot be investigating Burisma. If Shokin is investigating Burisma, then the President of the United States is withholding $1 billion of aid money because they won't fire a guy who's investigating a company where his son works. The only way that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden can look sane and normal and non-corrupt is if Shokin is not investigating Burisma. What Hunter is doing here, he's mixing two different things. He could have been perfectly fine if he just left that last part out. If he just wrote, a priority for my dad was the ouster of the country's prosecutor general, Victor Shokin, for his failure to adequately investigate corruption. It was a view shared widely by European allies. That's fine. But in order to defend his dad, he has to say that I have worked and I'm working for a corrupt company. That doesn't make fucking sense. That doesn't make fucking sense. What the fuck does that supposed to mean? It's bullshit. In his head, he knows he has to say, Shokin never investigated Burisma. That's what he has to say. Shokin never investigated Burisma. My dad didn't fire him because he was investigating Burisma. He fired him because he was corrupt. But you can't say that he fired him because he didn't investigate Burisma. That can't be the driving force because you worked for Burisma.
But the other one used to be that there was an investigation into Burisma, which is quite obvious that there was, but it was dormant at the time. They used the word dormant a lot. And we'll deal with that in the next video in our series on the lies of the investigations of the Bidens and Ukraine. But as for now, as is clearly stated, there was no problem with Shokin until he stepped on a Biden's toe.